Church Production Magazine presents Choosing the Right Projector with Confidence. This webinar is brought to you by Christie. We now join our hosts, Mike Garrido and Curtis Lingard, for the webinar already in progress.
There's usually a bit of a conflict between where you'd like to put the projector and where you will probably have to choose to put the projector. A lot of projectors will have a suite of lenses to help you put it where you want to, but every once in a while you have to accommodate some of the limitations of lenses choices that you have. Then you're also going to want to consider how close people will be to the projector. So when it comes to power, if you're doing any kind of a mobile setup, if you're going to be moving the projector around, if you're going to have multi-purpose and it's not going to be in a standard location, you'll probably want to consider finding a projector that runs off of 110 volts. That'll allow it to work in any kind of standard outlet that you'll find in North America. Now, if it's going to be a permanent location, you'll probably have access to 208 volts, and that can open up a whole new choice of projectors. That allows you to go much bigger and brighter projectors. And traditionally in North America, it's usually a possibility to run new power if it's needed. Now, in many cases, a lot of effort has gone into the architecture for houses of worship. People don't typically want the technology to ruin the desired look of the room. So most people usually prefer the projectors to be functional, but remain concealed. They want the images up on the wall, but they don't want to see or hear the equipment. So if you're dealing with vaulted ceilings, which we commonly see, then hanging a projector from the ceiling probably isn't an easy option to accommodate. And in those cases, you may be looking at using something like an ultra short throw lens, which would allow the projector to be hung either above the screen or below the screen, and still allow you to achieve a fairly large image. The other option is you could use a longer throw lens and put it at the back of the room, or maybe in front of a mezzanine if there's one present. Now, before you settle on the location for the projector, it's definitely wise to consider how close people will be to the projector. After all, they're coming into this room to hear a message, not to hear the worryings of a projector. So if your projector is going to be loud, you may need to consider either locating it away from the congregation or possibly putting it into an environmental box, and that'll help reduce the noise. Now, you can also narrow down your projector options up front by choosing projectors that have a low noise level. Now that you can usually find on a spec sheet. You look for the sound rating. It's usually referred to as the dBA. And what you'll usually find is values around 40 dBA or lower can usually be located close to people without being overly disruptive. And the lower the number, the better. The next item that you should be aware of is your ambient light, and that's a critical item. So take note of all the light that's in the room, whether it's natural or electric. Look at your windows, see where the sun's coming in, understand if you have blinds. Take a look at your lighting in the room, whether or not it can be dimmed or controlled, whether as a grouping or maybe in fixed zones. And when you're doing this, you want to think beyond just that moment in time when you're in that room. When you're looking at when the light's coming in or where it's coming in, think of the time of day. Think of where the sun is. Think of how it'll flow throughout the day, where that light will fall within the room. That'll all play into considering where it will be when you're planning on using the projection. And so just keep that in mind when you look at it. All of these details tie into image quality that you can expect. And that's going to take us to the next item.
Image quality. The ambient light works in combination with the image size to help you determine how bright of a projector you should be looking at. At a very high level, the brighter the ambient light is in the room, the brighter the projector you'll want. We can't talk about ambient light without discussing screens. Screens are just as important as the projector. Screens can help project ambient light, provide a gain by narrowing the viewing angle, improve black levels, and possibly reduce the brightness that you need from the projector. All of this results in helping improve contrast ratio, which is key. In fact, contrast is king. Contrast is the difference between full white and full black in video. The higher the contrast, the bigger the difference in light levels between whites and blacks. This is important because it defines how well you can create all the levels of gray in between and translates into how well your audience can make out what's in the image, which, of course, is the ultimate goal. With low contrast, the images look washed out, and it's hard to make out the information and details. Your audience will squint and strain to see the images that they're focusing their efforts on, and they will not be listening to the message. Between image size and ambient light, screen selection, and the desired contrast, you can calculate how bright of a projector you need. This is a big milestone. You now have the ability to significantly reduce the range of projectors you're looking to choose from. If you're mobile and your environment and constraints are continuously changing, then you may need to look at a projector that covers you for most of the possible scenarios you've encountered. You have to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So what do we look at next? Well, it's resolution. Every projected image is made up of pixels. The higher the resolution, the more details that can be shown. However, just because you go with a high resolution doesn't mean your audience will see it. The size of the image and the distance from the image to the audience will determine how big a pixel can be before the audience can no longer detect individual pixels. At a certain distance, you'll lose the ability to tell one pixel from the one beside it. So the higher the resolution, the higher the cost of the projector, and there's no reason to pay for high resolution if your congregation can't actually resolve the detail. The content you want to show often defines how important color is to you. For IMAG applications, color is typically very important. IMAG is image magnification. That's where you have a person up front with a camera and a projected image of the person beside, so everybody in the audience can see. So with for basic text information, color is less important, but color reproduction is a result of the projector system design as well as the software correction. While the technology you choose to use will play an important role in color reproduction, it's not the deciding factor. There are some generalizations about one technology being better than another, but it really comes down to how it was designed. Avoid generalizations and trust your eyes. If color is a high priority for you, it may make sense to arrange a demonstration of the projectors you're considering to evaluate in firsthand. So the last item that's important when it comes to image quality is latency. Latency is fairly straightforward. It's the delay the projector introduces to the video signal. If you're using cameras and IMAG to show what's happening, then you typically want a very low latency so people don't see a big difference between what's happening live and what's happening on the screen. A big latency can be very distracting. Latency is not commonly on spec sheets, and it can vary with the signals being used. If this is important to you, you may want to talk to tech support or to find out what the latency is for the projector you're looking at.
So the next topic we evaluate is ease of use. And most churches that we've talked to, the tech teams are made up of volunteers who may or may not have a diploma in AV technology. So user-friendly controls can be an important factor in the selection of the projector. An important first step is to actually analyze the level of skill of your tech team. So you start off by figuring out who's going to be operating it. Are they an expert? Are they a novice? Have they had any kind of technical experience at all? Really critically evaluating their level of comfort level with this kind of equipment is important. Also understanding whether or not it's going to be the same people from week to week or event to event. Will it always be the same person? Is it going to be a set group? Or is it going to be rotating all the time and you're going to have new people all the time that have to learn how to use the equipment? On top of that, you have the complexity of your setup. Is it a simple setup where they just have to press the power button, or is it a much more sophisticated design where it's a full production studio and a live event that requires a lot of coordination? So all that ties into the learning curve required for your setup, and that's important. You need to understand what skill level and how quickly they can learn it. One thing that you can look for in projectors is the tool sets that accompany the projector, because it's not just the projector you're buying all the other things that come along with it. So there may be software that can help you do calibration or alignments. All these things that in the past have traditionally been done by exceptionally skilled technicians have over the years been simplified down into some software tools that accompany the projector. So when you're looking through your options, definitely ask about those, see what's available, and understand what that would mean for the people that are operating your setup. Now, aside from daily operation, you should also consider how easily it integrates into your ecosystem. Even from simple things like how will it be controlled? Are they going to use the remote control? Will they use the web? Are they going to use a tablet or a mobile device? Are they going to use a lighting console and use DMX or ArtNet? Or do you have a control system from AMX or Crestron? So understanding how that'll all integrate into your control system is important. Even knowing your signal path. Where are the signals coming from? What sources do you have? How will they be connected into the projectors? What kind of cable runs? How far do they have to go? All these things you should kind of just make note of and understand how that whole ecosystem works. Even knowing whether or not the signals are going to be fed outside of the room that you're considering right now. Maybe you're doing an overflow area with the projection so that people can see what's happening in the main room. Or maybe it's going to a satellite location with a different church that's attending. All those things should be kind of thought about and really planned out so you understand the full ecosystem and how somebody who's controlling the event can make sure the video goes where it needs to go. Generally speaking, short and shallow learning curves are what you want. It means that it's easier to master and you're going to get full functionality out of the equipment a lot sooner than you would more complex gear. You may need to consult with the people who will be operating this. If you know the person who's going to be operating it, it's worthwhile getting their opinion. Tell them about your choices, tell them what you're thinking about, have them let you know what their concerns are, and make sure that the equipment that you buy is going to address their needs as well. They're definitely an important part of the buying criteria.
So that leads to maintenance. Maintenance is needed to maximize performance and reliability. Maintenance is a part of any projector. It's just a question of what you need to do and how often it needs to be done. Ultimately, you want to reduce the touch points with the projector and reduce the need or potential need to call out a service technician. Start by looking at how often the projector will be used. How many hours per day, how many hours per week, how many hours per year. Knowing your required hours of operation can help determine how often you'll need to perform the maintenance task. You'll also want to know about your environment. Is it clean or dusty? Is it cool or hot? What about humidity? Will you be using smoke or fog effects? These items all impact how you plan your maintenance schedule. Ask about maintenance items and schedules for the projector you're considering. Lamps versus solid state filters. Do you need some? Do you need dust filters? Do you need fog filters? Accessibility to the projector and ease of access to the projector. This is often an important one for houses of worship. Accessibility can often be an issue if these applications due to the architecture, for example, affect access to the projector. Ladders, lifts, or scaffolding can be needed to access the projector. Stability, reliability, longevity are also important. Again, ask the supplier of the projector. Ask them for information, MCBS, schedule, that sort of thing. But you should even consider fine-tuning the images. If you're doing multi-projectors or blended setups, will you be able to access the projectors to fine-tune the alignment? Maybe you need a projector with software tools to help with this. Software tools can take a complex setup and make alignment easy and fast to complete with a very quick learning curve. If you have a complex system, consider asking about availability alignments on calibration tools, which may be available. You also want to know about what warranty and support is available to you. Check the details to know what's included and what's excluded, and also what programs exist. Also ask about other programs that exist to assist customers when failures occur. At Christie, we have products which qualify for CD exchange, which promises to deliver a replacement projector within 24 hours once tech support deduces the problem to reside in the projector. So when it comes to planning out the cost and the maintenance, maintaining the projector you need, Consider the consumables, plus the labor, plus the added expenses such as lift and scaffolding and rentals and things like that. That will give you your entire maintenance cost.
So tying into the maintenance cost, there's a very popular topic nowadays, and that's the choice between lamps or solid state. There's a lot of buzz in the projection world about solid state illumination. In particular, laser phosphorus gaining a lot of traction and popularity due to its ability to reach higher brightness levels than the LED could achieve. And it's also relatively cost effective. But it's important to know that there are applications that cater very well to solid state illumination, and there's also applications that still cater perfectly fine to lamps. There's definitely a place in the market for both, and it's really important to understand the benefits of both so you can choose whether or not it actually applies to your particular situation. So on the solid state illumination, the primary benefit is there's no lamps. So you don't have to worry about ordering or storing, having spare lamps. You don't have to worry about replacing them. That really helps simplify a lot of your maintenance schedule as well as your ongoing costs. And if you have a high-use application, that could potentially reduce the total cost of ownership. And it's also great for hard-to-access locations. What I mean by that is if you know that you have to put the projector in a very awkward location, that you'll have to get a lift out, or you'll have to get scaffolding or a tall ladder, or it's just a difficult location to squeeze into, a solid-state projector could be a great option for you simply because you won't have to access it as often, which can just make things a lot easier on you as well as reduce cost if you have to rent any equipment to access it. They have a long life, so you'll commonly see lifespans of 20,000 hours. And it's important to know that that 20,000 hours, or whatever the lifespan number that you see, is to a half brightness level. And what that means is if you buy, let's just say, a 10,000 lumen projector, at 20,000 hours, you'll be down around 5,000 lumens. So it's important to take a look at that and understand whether or not your application will still be functioning fine at 5,000 lumens. If you know that's not going to be bright enough, you either need to plan for a brighter solid-state projector, or maybe you should consider lamp-based projectors. The instant on-off is a great feature for solid-state. There's no warm-up times, there's no cool-down periods. You tell it to turn on, and it turns on, and it's instantly full brightness. You tell it to turn off, and it turns off without having to do a full cool-down. And then with a lot of these designs, there's really no consumables or replacement schedules for the 20,000 hours. Some designs may have air filters, some don't. Most of the Christie ones do not require air filters. However, if you happen to be using any kind of smoke or fog, we do have fog filters for many of our projectors, and those would have to be considered as part of this. Now, on the flip side, lamps have a lot of benefits. First of all, there's a lower cost to buy the projector up front. There's always a premium on solid state at this point. And going back to the item about the half brightness by the end of the 20,000 hours, when you have a lamp-based system, if you needed to maintain that initial brightness longer, lamps are the more cost-effective way to get back to full brightness. It's easy to replace a lamp, and you instantly go back to the brightness that you had when you first opened it up out of the box. That's a big benefit to lamps. Also, for applications that have low usage, if you're not putting a lot of hours onto it, do the math. Figure out how many hours a day you're going to use it, how many hours a week you're going to use it. What's that work out to for a year? And see if you're actually going to come anywhere close to the 20,000 hours. If you're not going to come close to the 20,000 hours, your total cost of ownership may actually be lower for a lamp-based system. So definitely consider that. So go through all those options. When you look at whether or not you need lamp or solid state, take a look at these benefits and determine if you're truly going to benefit from them. And that will just help guide your decision as to whether or not you need to go for lamp or laser phosphor or solid state in general.
So Curtis touched on some of the cost items. So everybody has a budget to work with. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. Sometimes they're split between capital budgets to buy the equipment and an annual budget to maintain the equipment. When considering a projector purchase, we recommend considering the total cost of ownership and then determining how it fits into your budget. Total cost of ownership is the purchase price plus the maintenance cost plus the operating cost. So purchase price versus the maintenance cost. Illumination type and, for example, 1 DLP versus 3 DLP. You know, there's a premium in solid state, as Curtis mentioned. But if the benefits of solid states are highly applicable, it can save you money when you look at the total cost of operation. There's also pricing levels between the technologies. So there's a certain price level for LCD, another one for 1 DLP, and another one for 3 DLP. But it's your usage and requirements that will often determine which technology you need. You also cannot forget about the operating costs. So power consumption plus labor, these can add up. So power consumption, things that are usually listed on the spec sheets for projectors. In the end, it comes down to knowing how your budgets work. Can you spend more upfront to get something that has lower maintenance and operating costs, resulting in lower total cost of operation? You may need to approach the board or to see if budget planning can be adjusted to accommodate a product which may offer a premium upfront but lower TCO overall.
So picking the right projector isn't overly difficult if you break it down into smaller pieces. It can definitely be overwhelming if you come into it without having any guidance and not knowing where to start. We recommend breaking it down to these small pieces. Take a look at your environment. Understand the image quality you're looking for. Figure out what kind of people you're going to have operating the projector and what kind of ease of use they need. Determine the maintenance schedule. Figure out what that means for you and your application, as well as your budgets. And then take a look at your costs overall. Do you care about an upfront cost? Do you care about maintenance costs? How do you split that up? How do your budgets work? All of those kind of play into breaking it down to those small pieces. Once you understand those 5 pieces, you can identify your priorities. Step by step, just figure out as you go through it which ones are items you can't compromise on, know which items are must-haves, which things are nice-to-haves, which things just don't matter. Yeah, they exist, but you really don't benefit from it and you don't really care. Take the time to understand what features will bring you value and which ones won't be used. Following the steps will help walk you through the process to narrow down the selection of projectors to a very narrow window. That will allow you to be confident in the projector you're choosing. Always remember, there are a lot of professionals in the form of integrators, dealers, distributors, as well as manufacturer support. We're all available to help. We're all happy to help. We want to make sure that you get the right projector and that you walk away knowing that you have exactly what you need for your congregation. So anytime you have questions, contact one of them. They'd be glad to help you out. That concludes the presentation we had for today. We'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
This is Carol, and let me give you a few of the questions that I'm seeing that have come through. We have a question from David on short throw projectors, and he says that, you know, they seem to have lower lumens, and he wants to know if there are some available to overcome the ambient light in the sanctuary.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you within our portfolio, we do have some low lumen projectors in the 3,000 and 3,500 lumen category, but we also have bright projectors. So our Q series line of projectors covers lumens ranging from 7,500 lumens up to 10,000 lumens, and there's a 0.38 to 1 lens available for that. And it's actually designed to be used in house of worship type applications where you need to have bigger, brighter images.
And 0.38 is a definition for ultra short throw, as David asked for UST.
Yes.
Okay, great. He also had a question, should projector and screen be 16:10 or 16:9?
So that really comes down to your content. You really want to make sure whatever content you're providing is going to match up. So if your content's going to be HD, if it's 1920 by 1080 resolution, that's a 16:9 aspect ratio. You can definitely put that onto a WUXGA product, a 1920 by 1200 resolution device. The only thing that will happen in that case is you won't use your full vertical resolution, and that's going to leave about 10% of your area of the panel not being used. And that's the reason why I mentioned that is it's important to know that if you buy a 10,000 lumen WUXGA product and you're only going to be using HD content on it, you're really only going to be using 9,000 lumens. And so just consider that when you do it. If you're going to make use of the full 1610, by all means go with WUXGA, but it's really driven by your content.
Okay, great. We have a situation, kind of a scenario here described by Clinton. So I'll read this off for you, and you can see what suggestions you might have for him. He says he needs 2 projectors with a 105-foot to 115-foot throw, shooting through diagonals of sanctuary, through morning sun and stained glass windows, plus overhead incandescent lights, stage theater lights as well. And then he's asking about the needs: standard definition, high definition, internet ready, possibly an environment box.
Well, there's a few other questions that come to mind when he says 105 to 115 foot throw. I'd be curious to find out, first of all, how big the screen actually is. I imagine it's a screen off to the side of the front of the church, which that kind of throw with lights, stage lighting, and what sounds like a little bit of natural light coming through some stained glass windows and things like that. Odds are you're going to go for a slightly brighter projector, more in the 15,000 lumen plus area.
What I'm going to do for you as well is make sure that Virginia has this information so that Clinton can email you specifically too with some questions.
Yeah, by all means, and especially if you could go through the steps that we outlined in the presentation, and just explain a little bit about the environment, the image quality that he expects, the maintenance schedule that he's looking at. But a little bit more information on the environment goes a long way in determining what kind of projector you actually need and can exceed your expectations, because that's really what you want to do. You want things to really pop for the congregation, and it's understanding your environment is the first step, and probably one of the more important ones in picking the right projector.
Okay, great. We have a question from Joseph, and he's wondering what target luminance would you aim for when choosing a projector? How should one go about determining what will be bright enough?
So, yeah, that goes back to the first topic about environment. So there's no easy answer right now. So this is where we have a combination of a few different factors. So the first thing you need to know is what screen size are you wanting to do? The second thing is figuring out the ambient light in the room. Is it going to be controlled? Is it going to be bright? I always love it if somebody can actually have a light meter and come to me and tell me exactly how many foot lamberts are in the room where the screen is. But then there's also the screen material. There's screen material that is designed to reject ambient light. There's also screens that don't. So all those kind of combine in, and what we can do is there's kind of a general rule of thumb is that your contrast ratio should be at minimum like a 10 to 1. And so based on the ambient light in the room, I would then do the math to figure out what I would need to have at least a 10 to 1 contrast ratio. So we'd just have to discuss some of the details ahead of time in order to figure out what that brightness equates to. You can even have some screens that end up giving you a gain. What they do is they refocus the light from being a wide dispersion to being a narrow dispersion. So if you know your audience is within a very small viewing angle, you could use a higher gain screen, and that could reduce the demand on brightness on the projector.
Another thing to keep in mind though is if there's a lot of natural light. I believe we had a picture of one church in the presentation where there's a number of windows in the room. Be aware when the congregation is getting together. Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it at both times? In which case the light will be different depending on the time of day. So I want to add that.
Okay. Very good. There's a question too for both of you, Curtis and Mike. If you would just share your thoughts and give your suggestions on rear screen projectors.
If you have the space, you get some great performance out of them. You get some excellent contrast. The ambient light issue kind of goes away.
There's excellent gain screens that you can use for rear projection to really focus the light on where the people are. There's also a lot more control of sound. If you need a lot of light and the projector happens to be a little louder, you don't want them above the congregation. You can actually put them away from almost anything. And there's also a feeling of cleanliness to the room when it's rear projected. You don't have additional boxes sitting in people's view. So if you have the room, it's a great solution.
Yep.
Okay, very good. We have a question from Richard about if you can just talk a little bit about resolution choices again, SD versus HD versus 4K. What do people keep in mind when buying for the future? And then also he wants to know if HDMI is the input to plan on.
So, resolution, I still like to go back to will you be able to see the difference? So obviously if you're close to a display, going from SD to HD is a night and day difference. HD to 4K is pretty much the same kind of difference. The catch is if your audience is located at a certain distance, their eyes can't actually resolve the difference between them. Kind of like if you have your cell phone, right? Your cell phone looks like it has great resolution, but really it typically isn't that amazing. You can take a low-res image, located a distance away from an audience, and it can look like it's high resolution. You really need to consider where the people will be sitting to where the image is, and will they be able to determine the difference. If they can, the higher resolution, the better you can project detail up. You can put more information up. It can be finer in all the details that you can put in place. And it gives you a bigger canvas to work with when you're looking at creating your own content. So obviously, higher resolution is better. Just make sure that they can determine the difference between it.
And just to touch a little bit on, because he also asked about inputs into the projectors. There's a fair bit to be said about HDMI and DisplayPort, and that you can go fiber distribution as well. But it's also SDI, like the 3G SDI, which is a single BNC, which has been around for a long time. But what it really comes down to is the image processing that you have in the projector. If you're providing an excellent, let's say HDMI 2.0, which is the 4K 60 hertz signal coming across an HDMI cable, but if your projector can't process it, then you shouldn't even have considered that projector. So make sure you know and you understand what the image processing capabilities of the projector are. You can have great resolution, but if you can't utilize all the signals that are present or the signal that you want to utilize, then it becomes a bigger issue, because odds are you'll want to convert to that signal, and then it means that additional boxes and additional things you're going to have to worry about during your every Sunday. But the important thing is to, when it comes to signals too, it's usually what we find is when it's most effectively used is when people agree on using the one signal to distribute to all the systems that they're using. So, for example, if you're going to have multiple projectors and you've decided that you're going to be using HDMI, by all means, feed all the projectors HDMI. Let all the processing happen the same, so the congregation can look up at a screen and see the same on one screen as on the other, same resolution and same effects. So you don't have anything cut off or anything like that, or delays, because image processing does introduce delays into the signal. You use different kinds of signals, you'll have different kinds of delays.
Yeah, you also need to be aware of the distance between your source and the projector as well. Some signals are great for short distances, some are intentionally designed for longer distances. So your standard HDMI, usually anything over 20 feet long, you end up getting sparkles in the image, unless you buy a really high-end cable. Or another option is you could do extenders. There's fiber extenders, there's Cat5 extenders. You could go with HD-based T, but yeah, as you go longer distances, you're going to look for different types of signals, and that's usually where the 3G SDI or HD-based T comes into place. So that's just another factor to consider. It's just the difference between the distance of the source and the projector.
Okay, very good. I have a question too about a copy of the slideshow. It's you know, the PowerPoint presentation, and if that will be available from someone who got stuck on a conference call and couldn't join us in time, and we will be able to make that available to you. And we'll have your email address and a copy of this question here, so we will make sure we get it to you. Here's another specific request for your input, Curtis and Mike. Jeffrey wants to know, how do you overcome the color cast of dimmed incandescent lights that are spilling onto the screen?
Okay, so anytime you have ambient light that creates any kind of hue or shift in color temperature of the image, what you want to do there is you want to look for projectors that have the capability to do electronic correction of colors. That comes in a couple different flavors. So you have some really basic projectors that when you go into the menu, you can tell it what kind of a surface it's on, whether it's on a whiteboard, blackboard, a yellow wall, green wall. All those options exist in some of the basic projectors. When you get into the advanced ones, they usually allow color mixing. So you can go in and fine-tune the reds, the greens, the blues, and the whites. And that's pretty much what I do there. A lot of them will even allow you to create those settings and recall them. So if the lights are on and doing it, you can bring that color setting back in. And when that lighting goes away and you're back to a natural light, you can turn it off and go back to the natural performance of the projector. But that's really what you want to do, is look for any kind of electronic color correction that's in the projector.
Okay. And here's another question. How about when we have only VGA and DVI in our current projector? Do we need to replace the projector to match the newer system? We're using an adapter to downgrade the HDMI to VGA.
Oh, so VGA is it's still quite common as an input source, and just because the projector has a VGA input doesn't mean it won't satisfy your needs. But if you are going to convert from DVI to VGA, I would suggest making sure you use a high quality converter. You're taking a digital signal and converting it to analog.
Yeah, I think building on what Mike said, I think it really comes down to which projector you're using, knowing how it'll handle the signal.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to do a conversion, if you have to get an external box, it's definitely not the time or place to go with a cheap option. Go with one that does a quality job, because that's going to be the deciding factor of your image quality. If you have a bad converter, you will see that in your image.
Yeah. You can't forget that the projector puts up most projectors put up what they see. So if you give it a bad signal, it'll put up a bad signal. The projectors are typically not designed to clean up signal.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Curtis and Mike. This was really, really good information. And we want to thank everyone for attending today. You can contact us. We can put you in touch with Curtis and Mike if you email me at editorial@churchproduction.com. And we want to thank you all for attending and taking the time today. And let us know. Again, if you have any further questions, we will pass them to Christy. And we thank you for attending.